morning. I'm Maiki Oreta, and you're watching Business 360, where we break down the numbers, connect the dots, and give you the developments and the insights you need to navigate, adapt, and lead. Let's dive right in. The U.S. State Department says corruption in the Philippines continues to hinder the influx of foreign investments. The Philippines' gross borrowing spiked to more than 508 billion pesos in August, nearly triple the amount a year ago. And the Agriculture Department says crop damage due to recent storms reaches 1 billion pesos. Global markets end the week on a positive note, with U.S. and European stocks climbing after inline inflation data. But despite Friday's gains, Wall Street still closed the week lower. U.S. stocks finished higher Friday as the August Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index rose 0.3%, exactly in line with expectations. On an annual basis, PCE inflation picked up to 2.7% from 2.6% in July. Solid consumer spending also underlined the resilience of the U.S. economy.
The biggest potential headwind in the short term for markets is if the market starts to think that the Fed can't cut because of data improving in the economy and inflation getting worse. As long as inflation stays where it is and the data regarding focusing on unemployment and employment data is a little questionable or revisions are negative, they will continue to be able to cut, which I think will bode extremely well for markets into the new year.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average climbed 0.7%, the S&P 500 up by 0.6%, and the Nasdaq up by 0.4%. Over in Europe, markets also closed higher. London's FTSE up by 0.8%, Germany's DAX higher by 0.9%, and France's CAC 40 up by 1%. The U.S. State Department warns that corruption in the Philippines remains a major obstacle to investment, even as the country takes steps to improve its business climate. In its 2025 Investment Climate Statement, the Finance Department flags the country's complex, slow, and sometimes corrupt judicial system, which it says delays the timely and fair resolution of commercial disputes. It also points to traffic gridlock in major cities, port congestion, and the dominance of large family-owned conglomerates, which often crowd out smaller or even international players. Still, the report notes that Manila has moved to improve the investment landscape, with the Philippines maintaining investment-grade credit ratings backed by sound macroeconomic fundamentals. The Philippines' gross borrowings jumped to 508.53 billion pesos in August, nearly triple the level a year ago. Treasury data shows this compares with just 174.03 billion pesos in August of 2024. The surge was driven mainly by the government's retail Treasury bond issuance last month, highlighting its growing reliance on debt to finance spending. The peso is seen staying under pressure this week after stronger than expected U.S. data triggered a pullback in bets for Federal Reserve rate cuts. Michael Ricafort, chief economist at Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation, says traders will also watch key U.S. economic reports due later this week, as these could shape expectations for future Fed policy. Ricafort expects the peso to trade between 57.75 and 58.45 per dollar in the coming days. Edna Marcoleta, the wife of Senator Rodante Marcoleta, sits as an independent director at Stronghold Insurance, the firm that issued bonds for contractors tied to the Discayas in the multi-billion peso flood control scandal. A notarized 2022 acknowledgement shows Sara Discaya, through Alpha and Omega, personally transacted with Stronghold for a bond obligation. Former Senator Panflo Lacson earlier questioned Marcoleta's support for the Discayas, flagging possible conflict of interest issues in the Senate probe. The Marcoleta's son, Paulo Henry, slammed the Bilyonaryo news channel for alleged bias. He defended his mother, saying she is only an independent director of Stronghold and not a co-owner or regular director. Bilyonaryo's report did note, however, that her role as independent director, with no mention of her being a co-owner. Authorities have frozen 427 bank accounts linked to the Diskaya family, with transactions worth 180 billion pesos over the last 9 years. Investigators say most of the funds came from government projects, particularly flood control contracts since 2016 during the Duterte administration. Companies including St. Gerard Construction, St. Timothy, Alpha and Omega, and St. Matthew received billions of pesos, mostly from the DPWH. Senator Panfilo Lacson estimates the Diskayas cornered close to 207 billion pesos from 2016 to 2025, half of it under Duterte's term. The Land Bank of the Philippines is at the center of a suspected kickback scheme tied to flood control contractors Curly and Sara Diskaya. The Anti-Money Laundering Council says Land Bank handled 70% of the Diskaya's 427 accounts across 16 banks, with transactions totaling 180 billion pesos from 2016 to 2025. The AMLC notes that the Diskayas obscured the source of these funds by commingling money from fake or substandard projects to avoid detection. Senators also flagged a 457 million peso cash release to Sims Construction, a contractor linked to alleged ghost projects in Bulacan, raising questions over Land Bank's role in these transactions. The Department of Justice slams contractor Sara Diskaya for making a finger heart gesture during her appearance in Manila. DOJ spokesman Nico Clavano called the move a sign of insincerity and complacency during all persons of interest in the case, calling all persons in the case to act properly. Diskaya, tagged in anomalous infrastructure projects, showed up at the DOJ on September 17 for the continuation of her and her husband Curly's application for witness protection program. Instead of answering reporters' questions, she flashed a K-pop style finger heart. After spending more than 3 hours inside, she left saying she hoped to be turned into cool memes. Why does this matter? Well, the Diskaya case is at the center of the multi-billion peso flood control corruption scandal, with huge implications for public infrastructure spending, capital allocation, and investor confidence in government projects. The Senate Blue Ribbon Committee may soon release a partial report on the flood control scandal, revealing that all of the senators of the 19th Congress inserted at least 100 billion pesos worth of projects into the 2025 national budget. Committee Chair and Senate President Pro Tempore Panfilo Lacson said that they will not hold hearings this week to focus on consolidating documents and testimonies for this initial finding. He added the committee is reviewing the 2025 General Appropriations Act, already branded as the most corrupt budget, and is determining which information to prioritize. Lacson warned that multi-billion peso insertions could undermine infrastructure projects vetted at the local level, urging lawmakers to show self-restraint. Now, the revelation highlights how budget insertions impact infrastructure spending, public debt levels, and investor confidence in the country's fiscal governance. Amendments or insertions, whether individual or institutional, made during Senate deliberations are part of the regular budget process. That's according to Senate President Tito Soto, who stressed that issues of ghost projects and failed flood control programs should not be used to brand all amendments as illegal and improper. He noted that many amendments cover classrooms, farm-to-market roads, and bridges that benefit communities, especially in far-flung areas. Some remain unfunded and are tagged for later release, or FLR. Soto added that for the 2026 budget, the Senate will introduce changes to promote greater transparency, people's participation, and accountability. The debate over budget amendments goes to the heart of public spending integrity, with direct implications for infrastructure delivery, investor confidence, and the country's fiscal credibility. S&P Global Ratings just lowered its outlook for Philippine growth through 2027, flagging trade risks and weaker investment flows. But with inflation inflation rather low and domestic demand still resilient. The big question is, where does this leave growth rates and the peso? To help us read the macro and the market, we're joined by Nick Mapa, Chief Economist at Metro Bank. Hi, Nick. Thanks for being here with us.
Good morning, Maiki. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so Nick, how significant is the S&P downgrade? Expectations are that we won't be hitting the 6 to 7% GDP band until 2027. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Mikey, good morning. This is something that also I think another government agency flagged that we won't be seeing growth return to, or won't be hitting our targets in the near term. Several factors for that. We have a very challenging global landscape. You have the sort of uncertainty regarding the tariff situation. Overall global growth is on the downtrend or moderating given all these challenges. Domestic front, we still have challenges here. As you mentioned, the inflation picture it has been on the downtrend the past few months, but we could see that kicking back up in the near term. So that's something to watch out for. But once again, the way I describe the growth trajectory for the Philippines, it's good. We are still able to hit 5.6% GDP growth. Not great in the sense that we're not reaching our aspirations, but I think as we continue to move forward, we must always try to hit those growth targets. I think that's something that we all would want to achieve going forward.
Yeah. The S&P and the BSP, they don't expect us to be hitting the 6 to 7% growth assumption. Growth has held up so far, but not to the level of expectations after 5.6% in 2024. How do you interpret this shift in the outlook?
Yeah, well, the Donald Trump continues to unleash bombshell after bombshell with regard to the tariffs. I think most people had factored in some form of tariffs coming in this year, but he just brought out the whole blanket tariff for all countries, and I think that's what's really thrown a curveball to all of us. I mean, we're used to this. We've seen Donald Trump in the past, and we can likely to continue to see all these uncertain moves come out from Donald Trump. That's really going to weigh on our growth prospects on the trade side. Also on the domestic front, we continue to see household consumption recover. However, it's not at the same pace that we've seen in the past. Lastly, on interest rates, I mean, BSP has been very proactive in lowering borrowing costs over the past few months. However, we have to remember we came from 6.5%, 6.5%. They've lowered it by 150 basis points, but 5% for me is still quite elevated and restrictive to some extent.
Yeah. Your forecast for GDP, you started the year conservatively, more conservative than most. While people were pegging growth at about 6%, you guys at Metro Bank put a forecast of 5.7% for the full year. 2 weeks ago, you revised that to 5.4%. That was 2 weeks ago, and a lot has changed, and a lot could still change. Are there any expectations that this 5.4% target could be revised lower based on the Q3 figures?
Yeah, we'll be waiting for the third quarter numbers. The trade numbers, I think, is the numbers that we'll be watching in particular. Also on the consumption front, you're seeing inflation come down below 2% for the past few months, but that could be kicking up in the near term. So that could, in a way, dampen household consumption or the recovery of household consumption in the coming months. But hopefully we still see that 5.4% move north, but we'll have to watch the data. That's what we are here, just watching how the numbers play out, and then we'll reassess and put out our new numbers then.
Yeah. In terms of targets, inflation, that's a figure that is looking good. 2 to 4% is still looking realistic. Inflation averages 1.7% this year. So do you think, given this trajectory, we can still maintain that low inflation trajectory?
Yeah, well, the BSP's own inflation forecast, they have a term for it. They call it target consistent over the policy horizon, meaning inflation will stay around 2 to 4% this year, next year, and the year after that. So this is very positive for household consumption. It's also good for firms and corporations. They're able to plan their medium-term targets a little better. There is a bit of a buildup in price pressures. We're seeing that food inflation has started to tick higher. We had a spate of storms that come in over the past few days, and maybe that nudges up prices. Hopefully the storm damage isn't as extensive as it was last year. But once again, these are all things that we'll be monitoring and watching moving forward. We see inflation actually ticking up before the end of the year and moving into 2026. But BSP is still confident that that stays within the 2 to 4% on average for the full year 2026 and 2027.
Talking about interest rates, the BSP is going to be meeting in October and again in December. In between that, we've got the Fed meeting in November. What's your base case for our policy rates here in the Philippines over the course of the next 12 months?
Yeah, well, you have the BSP governor and the BSP. Basically, the language coming out from them is that they're close to Goldilocks, what they call Goldilocks territory, with regard to the policy rate. So I do see them pausing at the October meeting, largely because they'll likely be waiting for the third quarter GDP numbers that should be coming out in the coming months. So by December, they'll see the third quarter GDP number. They have indicated that if growth is a bit on the soft side, they will consider a rate cut before the end of the year. So that's our base case. We see them pausing in October, waiting for the third quarter numbers to come out, and then cutting at their last meeting for the year.
Okay, so a pause in October and a possible 25 bips cut, would you say, in December?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds about right. It's in line with the BSP's baby step movement, 25 basis point rate cuts at a time.
Yeah, it's been baby steps all the way since last year. Nick, I wanted to ask you, is monetary policy transmitting effectively? Are the lower rates reaching bank lending, corporate borrowing, and household consumption? What are you seeing on the ground? And we've got to note that the impact of monetary policy, there's a lag impact when it comes to rate cuts. Well, unlike rate increases, they go up almost instantly. But when it comes to interest rates going down, there is that 9 to 12 month lag effect. What are you feeling on the ground, Nick?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the BSP always indicates that whenever they have any moves for monetary policy, we'll have to sort of factor in that lag that they talk about. So 9 to 12 months, I think, is about right. The BSP was at 6.5%, and they cut baby steps. So we're only starting to feel the positive impact from those rate cuts, and they are starting to come out. We're starting to see better lending numbers on our side, housing loans on the consumer level as well as the firm-based level. We're also seeing some positive traction on that. But I think there's still some space for the BSP to continue to cut policy rates. And given the challenging landscape, I think the right move would be to consider easing further a bit more. As the BSP said, they're close to Goldilocks territory. So maybe a cut or two in the coming months. And that's where the BSP should be to help support growth.
Okay, so we're feeling some headway in the transmission on the interest rate front. On the peso, how do you see the currency trading into 2026, given the current account path and the interplay of both global and domestic interest rates?
Yeah, so I always take my cue from the BSP, and the BSP has their own projections for the BOP. They see a BOP deficit this year and next year. That being said, with that expectation that we might see a bit more outflow in the next 2 years, we see the peso actually appreciating, but just how we've been performing throughout the year, the peso is up for the year, but once again, not the most. It's not outperforming our peers. So we will see an appreciation, but a very modest appreciation given the current account and the BOP outlook from the BSP. So peso, stronger, a bit stronger, but maybe not as strong as its peers. Not experiencing the very substantial pickups that we're seeing from Taiwan dollar or Thai baht. But once again, stronger, but not as strong as our peers.
So what's that level by year end, Nick?
Currently, we see at 55.75, but once again, still very variable. A lot of things can change. If the Fed starts changing its trajectory or its guidance, we could see it at 57.10.
Okay, a lot to watch out for. Going to the bond market, our bond market was the fastest growing in East Asia in the first quarter. It slowed in Q2 as BSP and corporate issuances pulled back. Where do you think the bond market stands today? And we're about to get a nice bump. If JP Morgan's we're on that positive watch list, with the inclusion, talk to us about how transformational this could be for us.
Yeah, so we are on the watch list. We recently got included in the watch list for the JP Morgan EMBI. And what that would do if we finally get inclusion into that index, it would mean structural inflows to the country. Foreign investors who track that particular index will be, in a way, forced to buy Philippine bonds, and that would mean they'd have to keep those bonds as they track the index, the global EMBI index. So that means more inflows. So on the foreign currency front, that's positive for the Philippines, as well as on the bond market, that's good because it's supported by these foreign inflows. So I think, all the fundamentals point to a bond market rally here in the Philippines. I always like to describe it as everybody's all dressed up and ready to go, just waiting for the party to start. Several factors that are keeping that from happening. But I think if you look at the fundamentals, inflation's down, BSP's cutting policy rates, and you have that possible very very likely inclusion in the index. For most players, I think the countries that got included in the watch list, all of them got eventually included in the watch list. So it's just a matter of time, I feel, for us to be finally included in the JP Morgan EMBI. So hoping up for that. All of the foreign investors that we've spoken to, very, very optimistic about that happening. So once again, just waiting for that. Waiting for the shoe to drop for that to finally happen.
Yeah, waiting for the shoe to drop. The fundamentals are there, and we're ready to go to this bond party. Okay, I have to point out that we can't ask you about corruption, so we'll leave that at that. But what's your bull case? What's your bull case for us with the reforms, with the possible index inclusion in JP Morgan? Where do you see equities, the peso trading, and the 10-year bond yield settling?
Yeah, once again, if we do get that inclusion in the near term, that would mean more foreign flows. One thing we've also learned, at least from our dealings with our foreign counterparties abroad, they said once you actually get inclusion in once you get to watch list or actual inclusion in the JP Morgan bond index, that that puts the spotlight on your country. Once again, a lot of people who weren't probably looking at the Philippines on the equity side are probably going to say, hey, why not consider the Philippines given the bond market inclusion? So once again, it's a positive spotlight if we finally do get that inclusion. That would bring foreign flows to strengthen the peso, probably closer to where our base case of 55.75 by year end. And if the growth story, I think, of the Philippines starts to pick up, I think that would attract more foreign flows, both on the portfolio side as well as the FDI side. So hopefully we do get those numbers. I know they're not as optimistic as initial or as most other analysts, but 5.4% GDP growth this year. Hopefully we can get that higher. But once again, a lot of heavy lifting that we'll have to be doing. But I think for the most part, BSP cutting policy rates, inflation is still quite low. That's a very positive story to close out the year.
Yeah, all right. As we asked you for your bull case, Nick, what's your bear case? Global rates up, fiscal credibility being questioned. How low could equities go? Right now we're at 6,000. We're at the 6,000 level. And how weak could the peso get? And also, how high could bond yields reprice? And this is, again, the bear case.
Yeah, I think everything's still variable up in the air. We'll have to take our cue from the U.S., where U.S. Treasuries end at the end by year end. A lot of things can still happen. You have the Fed poised to cut policy rates, but once again, that could all change very quickly. So very difficult to give actual numbers on with your program. But once again, we'll always update our numbers. You can always find them online. We'll be happy to share them there. But thank you. Once again, a lot of things happening. We'll be watching the markets.
All right. So Nick Mapa, thank you so much for your time this morning, Chief Economist at Metro Bank.
Have a good day. Take care. Bye.
We're going to be taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the narratives that matter most to your bottom line. Welcome back. Let's check on Asian markets this Monday morning. Right now, I'm seeing a mixed picture. The Nikkei 225 is in the red, lower by 0.9%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index going the other way, up by 1.1%. Shanghai's Composite down by 0.1%. And Singapore's Straits Times Index higher by 0.2%. Now, here at home on Friday, Philippine shares slid for the fifth straight session. PSE index fell 0.2% to 60.27, making it the 9th worst performer in Asia. Sectoral indices were mixed. Property dropped more than 1%, while mining and oil gained 0.7%. Decliners outnumbered advancers 110 to 82, with value turnover at 5.5 billion pesos. Now, the downturn mirrored a broader slide in regional and U.S. markets as rising U.S. Treasury yields weighed on risk appetite. Taking a look at our market today, as of 10:33, the main gauge is trading to the upside, higher by a bit, just 0.1% to 60.36. Broader all shares index in the green as well, up by about 0.3% to 36.54. Taking a look at the sub-indices, everything is trading in positive territory except for the services counter, which is now down by 0.6%, limiting the market's advance. Total volume traded is at 190 million shares, valued at 698 million pesos. Market breadth is positive. We've got 81 advancers, 58 decliners, and 61 stocks unchanged. Taking a look at the currencies, the peso opened at 58 flat against the greenback, up from its previous close of 58.10. On the corporate front, Ayala Land keeps up its share buybacks under its ongoing repurchase program. In a disclosure, the company said that it acquired 2.5 million common shares at prices ranging from 25 pesos and 30 centavos to 26 pesos each. After the transactions, Ayala Land's outstanding shares stood at 14.53 billion, while Treasury shares rose to 2.18 billion. Share buyback signal company confidence and can boost shareholder value, key indicators closely watched by investors. Filipinos now need more than 3 million pesos to buy a home, according to the latest data from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. As of the second quarter of 2025, the median price for all types of housing is 3.41 million pesos. In the National Capital Region, median home prices reached 4.61 million pesos, compared to 3.2 million pesos in areas outside the NCR. Median prices in the Greater Manila area, Metro Cebu, and Metro Mindanao remained below 4 million pesos. Overall, housing prices rose 7.5% year-on-year in the second quarter, led by a 10.5% jump outside the NCR. Rising housing costs directly impact affordability, mortgage demand, and real estate investment, with wider effects on consumer spending and economic growth. Former Energy Secretary Alfonso Cusi and 4 other ex-DOE officials post bail over graft charges filed by the Ombudsman. The case stems from the alleged railroad approval of the sale of substantial shares in the Malampaya gas project to a company owned by Davao businessman Dennis Uy in 2019. Cusi, together with former Undersecretaries Donato Dionosio Marcos and Robert Byron Uy, Assistant Secretary Leonido Jimenez Pulido III, and Director Cesar Gaba de la Fuente III, each posted 90,000 pesos bail on September 10. They face charges of violating the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. Their arraignment and pretrial are set for October 1st, with court appearances on September 25, 24, 25, and 26 for the marking of exhibits, stipulation of facts, and other matters. Partido Demokratiko Pilipino, where Cusi is acting chairman, earlier confirmed he is facing a case with the Sandigan Bayan over the Malampaya deal. The Malampaya gas project is a strategic energy asset, and the case puts the spotlight on governance, energy security, and investor confidence in the country's biggest power projects. The House of Representatives is studying a measure that would require private sector inspection of government infrastructure projects. The move is aimed at preventing corruption in future public works. Bicol Saro Party List Representative Terry Ridon, former chair of the short-lived Infrastructure Committee, said this is one of several proposals under review. Other recommendations include civil society participation in procurement, full proponent identification, and public disclosure at every stage of the budget process. The House is also pushing to strengthen the Independent Commission for Infrastructure by granting its subpoena and contempt powers. Greater private sector and civil society oversight could improve transparency in infrastructure spending, a key factor for investor confidence and economic growth. The Department of Migrant Workers and 2 United Nations agencies developed new fair and ethical recruitment guidelines expected to be adopted at next year's ASEAN Summit. DMW Secretary Hans Kakdak discussed the initiative with Amy Pope, Director General of the International Organization for Migration at the UN General Assembly last week. The guidelines, to be crafted with inputs from the International Labour Organization and IOM, will form the basis of a regional migration instrument during the Philippines' ASEAN chairmanship in 2026. Kakdak also outlined the DMW's reform package to improve the wages and conditions of domestic workers, including a minimum wage target of $500 per month. Overseas workers remain a key driver of the Philippine economy through remittances, making migration reforms crucial for household incomes, domestic consumption, and currency stability. We're taking a short break. Business 360 will be right back. Welcome back. Pasig City Mayor Vico Sotto is rumored to be next in line to replace Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong as ICI Special Advisor. Mayor Vico recently emerged as one of the officials who exposed alleged corruption in DPWH flood control projects. When asked by PNC if he would accept the post should it be offered, he replied simply, "We will release a statement." Palace Press Officer Claire Castro, meanwhile, clarified that Mayor Magalong's resignation was due to a conflict with the Constitution and the local government code.
Bakit hindi siya pwede maging investigator? Kasi magdodoble po siya ng trabaho at yun po ay conflict sa Constitution at conflict po sa local government code.
The statement Mayor Vico Sotto was referring to in this was the group of mayors for good governance expressing its support for Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong. They cite his track record as proof that his integrity, courage, and independence are non-negotiable and form the essential foundation of true leadership. They point to his role in the Mama Sapano tragedy report, which he defended with independence, rejecting pressure to alter findings. The group added that Magalong is living proof that leaders of character still exist. Local leadership credibility is crucial to restoring trust in public institutions, a factor that directly impacts investor sentiment, governance stability, and confidence in long-term development projects. Typhoons destroy more than ₱1 billion worth of staple grains. The Department of Agriculture reports that losses incurred by over 55,000 farmers and fishers have reached ₱1.38 billion. Production damage across 9 regions is estimated at 110,000 metric tons. Rice suffered the biggest loss, over 88,000 metric tons, due to the combined effects of the southwest monsoon and typhoons Mirasol, Nando, and Opong. Corn, high-value crops, and cassava also sustained damage at more than 16,000, 5,000, and 9 metric tons, respectively. Agriculture damage not only hurts farmers' incomes, but also threatens food supply, inflation, and overall consumer spending. Now, the Department of Transportation plans to start bidding out operations and maintenance contracts for both MRT3 and LRT2 by the first half of 2026. For MRT3, the government is taking a dual-track approach, accepting both solicited and unsolicited proposals with support from the Asian Development Bank. An unsolicited offer is expected soon, but officials have not yet named the interested party. The new MRT3 contract will follow the expiration of its current agreement in July 2025, with full control now back under the government. Meanwhile, the DOTR is also working with the International Finance Corporation to privatize LRT2, in a bid to boost ridership and expand the rail line. Rail privatization will shape billions in new investments and impact daily commuter costs. Key factors for urban mobility, economic productivity, and private sector participation in infrastructure. Former presidential spokesperson Harry Roque says former President Rodrigo Duterte did not lose consciousness while in ICC detention. On BNC's Agenda Weekend, Roque said FPRRD fell and hit his head on the floor but did not lose consciousness. The former president was then taken to the hospital, according to a first-hand source.
Nakakalab ako ng impormasyon siguro ng buwan ng Agosto galing sa isang empleyado ng detention facility na nahulog daw si Tatay Digong at tumama ang ulo sa sahig at dahil dyan ay ilinabas at dinala sa ospital. No? At kung hindi ako nagkakamali, ito yung pagkakataon na nagkaroon nga ng ulat na linabas sa ICC si Tatay Digong at ang sabi ay for routine check. Okay. Pero lilinawin ko rin na hindi ko alam kung itong impormasyon nito na binigay ko kay BP Sara ang basihan nung kailan lang binanggit ni VP Sara na nawalan nga ng consciousness si Tatay Digong dahil sa inadulas.
The statement comes after Vice President Sara Duterte claimed her father was being mistreated in the ICC detention, saying he was found unconscious on the floor of his room. The ICC case against Duterte has far-reaching implications for the rule of law, political stability, and the country's international reputation, factors closely watched by investors. Mixed fuel price adjustments are expected this week. The Department of Energy expects gasoline to roll back by up to 80 centavos per liter, while diesel may increase by around 5 centavos per liter and kerosene by up to 40 centavos per liter. The DOE cites continuing geopolitical tensions as the driver of price hikes, while Iraq's resumption of oil exports to Turkey is seen to pull gasoline prices lower. Fuel costs directly impact transportation, logistics, and consumer prices, with ripple effects on inflation and economic growth. We're taking a short break. Business 360 will be right back. Welcome back. 4 people are killed after gunman opens fire inside a Mormon church in Michigan in the U.S. The suspect crashed his vehicle through the front doors of the church before opening fire and then setting the building ablaze. At least 8 others were injured. The gunman was killed in a shootout with police. The perpetrator, identified as Thomas Jacob Sanford, was a former U.S. Marine from a nearby town.
I have a couple updates for you. There is a couple additional bodies that we've discovered in the church. So that makes our total victim count up to 4 victims. As I said before, there has already been the suspect who is deceased as well. So we have 5 deceased persons from this tragic incident.
U.S. federal agents patrolled the streets of Chicago on Sunday. This is part of President Donald Trump's crime crackdown, but residents pushed back, telling them to go home. Trump had made crime a major focus of his administration, even as violent crime rates have fallen in many U.S. cities. His crackdown on Democrat-led municipalities, including Los Angeles and Washington, has sparked legal challenges and protests. Elsewhere in the world, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky vows to hold Russia accountable for its attacks on his country. In his nightly video address, Zelensky said he expected the United States to convince Russia to change its position and stop the war. Russia launches hundreds of drones and missiles at Kiev and other parts of Ukraine on Sunday. At least 4 people are killed and dozens more.
У Запоріжжі, в Києві.
Today, all day after the Russian strike, we were dealing with the aftermath in Zaporizhia, Kyiv region, and other regions of ours. Most of the hits are regular civilian residential buildings, civilian sites. More than 80 people were injured. Unfortunately, 4 people were killed, among them 1 child. My condolences to their loved ones.
There's no safe place for Palestinians in Gaza. That's the conclusion of Felipe Lazzarini, Commissioner General of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees. He also called on UN member states to intensify efforts to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and restore peace in the enclave. In a recent interview, Lazzarini said Gaza has been devastated by attacks with critical facilities destroyed. More than 65,000 people in Gaza have been killed.
We have seen over the last 20 months already a total destruction. We have seen that there is absolutely no safe place for the Gazan. We have seen that health center, hospitals, schools, worship places have been targeted. We have seen an extraordinary toll within the population. More than 65,000 people have been killed, among them a vast majority of civilian and women and children. Now,
Pope Leo prays for the victims of the devastating typhoon that struck parts of Asia. This as he led his weekly Angelus prayer at St. Peter's Square on Sunday.
In recent days, a typhoon of exceptional strength has struck several Asian territories, particularly the Philippines, the island of Taiwan, the city of Hong Kong, the Guangdong region, and Vietnam. I am close to the affected populations, especially the poorest, and I pray for the victims, the missing, the many displaced families, the countless people who have suffered hardship, and also for the rescuers and civil authorities.
Super Typhoon Ragasa is the world's largest tropical storm this year. It has killed 17 people in Taiwan and 10 in the Philippines. In Vietnam, airports were closed and thousands evacuated from potentially affected areas. Now, the Devil Wears Prada star Meryl Streep crashes the Dolce & Gabbana show at Milan Fashion Week in character as Miranda Priestly. Streep wore Priestley's signature sunglasses and a Dolce & Gabbana vinyl trench coat. She surprised fans as she entered the theater escorted by security and trailed by co-star Stanley Tucci. Dolce & Gabbana confirmed the scene was filmed for the upcoming sequel set for release in May of 2026. The stunt boosts buzz for both the luxury fashion brand and the film sequel, highlighting the growing crossover between entertainment, luxury retail, and global consumer marketing. And that's it for Business 360. I'm Maiki Oreta. Thank you for joining us, and keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.